All right, we're live. Hey everyone, welcome back to English Unplugged. As always, this channel is not about perfect English or sounding like a native speaker. It's about real conversations, real thoughts, and real struggles, especially when it comes to learning English. So today I'm here with my friend. We weren't planning to make this topic serious, but somehow it came up naturally. And honestly, that's usually how the best conversations start. Before we jump into anything deep, let me ask you something simple. How was your day?
It was normal, I guess. Nothing special happened. Went to class, came back, did some work, checked my phone too much, the usual stuff. But even when a day looks normal from the outside, inside it can feel very different. I think that's what happened today. Everything was fine, but my head was busy the whole time.
Busy with what?
With thoughts, mostly about future things. About skills, about where I'm going, about whether I'm doing enough. And somehow, English always becomes part of that thinking, even when I don't want it to.
That's interesting, because English is not something new in your life. It's been there for years. So when you say it comes back, what do you mean exactly?
I mean, it's like a background app running all the time. Even when I'm not studying English, it's there. When I watch a video, I think about whether I understood everything. When I hear someone speak fluently, I notice it. When I try to express something complex, I feel the limit of my words.
It's not loud, but it's constant. Yeah, I get that. English becomes more than just a subject. It becomes something you measure yourself with.
Exactly. And I think that's the dangerous part. When you start learning English, it's exciting. You're proud when you learn new words. You feel happy when you understand a sentence without translation. But later, English stops being a new skill and starts becoming a standard, something you feel you should already have.
That shift is huge. From I'm learning to I should know this.
Yes, and nobody really warns you about that shift. Teachers don't talk about it, courses don't talk about it. Everyone just talks about vocabulary lists, grammar rules, and practice. But mentally, that shift changes everything.
I agree. And the funny thing is, from the outside, people might think you're doing fine. You can understand this podcast right now. You can follow conversations. You can communicate. But inside, it doesn't always feel like success.
Exactly. Sometimes I think, if someone else was at my level, I'd say they're doing well. But when it's me, I feel like it's not enough.
That's such a human thing. We're always harsher with ourselves.
Yeah, and English makes that worse, because it's so visible. If you don't know math, nobody notices in daily life. But if you don't know a word, or you say something wrong, it's right there in the conversation.
True. Language mistakes feel very public.
Exactly. And over time, you start preparing sentences in your head before speaking, even in casual conversations. You don't just talk, you plan.
And that planning kills the natural flow.
Yes, you want to say something simple, but your brain is busy checking grammar, tense, sentence order, and by the time you're ready, the conversation is moved on.
That's such a common experience, especially for B1 learners. You're not lost, but you're not free either.
That's the best way to describe it. Not lost, not free. You understand enough to feel the problem, but not enough to forget about it.
And I think many learners listening right now are nodding their head.
Yeah, because this stage lasts a long time, much longer than people expect. Nobody tells you that the middle stage is the longest and hardest part.
And that's where motivation slowly disappears.
Exactly. You don't quit loudly. You don't say, I give up. You just stop enjoying it. You study less, you avoid speaking, you stay silent more than you want to.
And silence becomes a habit?
Yes, and once silence becomes a habit, confidence starts to drop. Not just in English, but in yourself.
That's heavy, but also very honest.
It is. And I think we need more conversations like this. Not about how to learn faster, but about how it actually feels to learn English for years.
That's exactly why we're talking about this today on English Unplugged. You know, when you said that silence becomes a habit, that really stayed with me. Because I think that's how many problems start. Not with something big, but with something small that slowly becomes normal. At first, you're silent just for one moment, then another, and after some time, it feels easier to stay quiet than to speak.
Yes, exactly. And the strange thing is, nobody forces that silence on you. It's not like someone says, don't speak. You choose it yourself, again and again, without even realizing it. At first, it feels safe. You think, I'll speak later when my English is better. But that later never really comes.
That's such an important point. A lot of learners are always waiting for a future version of themselves, the version who speaks perfect English, makes no mistakes, sounds confident. But real life doesn't wait for that version.
Exactly. And the more you wait, the more pressure you put on yourself. Because now it's not just about speaking, it's about living up to that future image. And every time you don't speak, that image feels further away.
Yeah, and then English slowly stops being something you use and becomes something you judge yourself with.
Yes, that's a really good way to say it. I don't just speak English anymore. I evaluate my English all the time. If I make a mistake, I don't just correct it and move on. I remember it. I replay it in my head, sometimes even hours later.
That mental replay is exhausting, and I think people who speak their native language never experience that. They make mistakes too, but they don't carry them.
Exactly. When I speak my native language, I'm relaxed. I interrupt myself, I change sentences halfway, I joke, I exaggerate. I don't think about structure or rules. But in English, everything feels controlled, like I'm walking carefully, step by step, afraid to fall.
And that careful walking makes conversations slower.
Yes. And sometimes people notice that. They might not say anything, but you can feel it. The pause becomes longer, the energy changes. And even if they're kind, you still feel like you're holding things back.
That's when frustration starts to grow, right?
Definitely. Because inside you know you have thoughts, you have opinions, you're not empty. But the language doesn't always let you show that. So people see a smaller version of you, a quieter version. And that hurts.
That's a really important point for learners to hear. English is not just a tool for communication, it's also a tool for showing who you are. When that tool is limited, it feels like you are limited.
Yes. And after a while, that affects your confidence, even outside English. You start doubting yourself more. You speak less. You feel less visible.
And the scary part is, from the outside, nobody sees this struggle. People might say your English is fine or you're overthinking, but inside it doesn't feel fine.
Exactly. And sometimes those comments make it worse, because you start thinking, if my English is fine, why do I feel like this? Then you blame yourself even more.
Yeah, that's why advice like just speak or don't think too much doesn't really help.
It really doesn't. Because if it were that simple, we would already be doing it. The problem is not knowledge, it's emotion. Fear of sounding stupid, fear of being judged, fear of showing your weakness.
And those fears don't disappear just because someone tells you to relax.
Exactly. They come from experience, from moments when you didn't understand something, when someone corrected you in front of others, when you felt embarrassed. Those moments stay with you.
Yeah, emotional memory is strong. Even one bad experience can change how you feel about speaking for a long time.
Yes. And what's even harder is when you know the rules, but you still make mistakes. That creates a different kind of frustration. Because you think, I know this, why am I still getting it wrong?
That's very common at the B1 level. You're not guessing anymore. You're aware of your mistakes.
And that awareness is painful. When you're a beginner, mistakes don't hurt much, you expect them. But now, mistakes feel like proof that you're not improving fast enough.
And then comes comparison.
Yes, comparison is everywhere. Online videos, comments, classmates, coworkers. Someone always seems more fluent, more confident, more natural. And even if you know everyone's journey is different, you still compare.
It's almost automatic.
Exactly. And once comparison enters, motivation starts to disappear. You start asking questions like, why am I so slow? Or what am I doing wrong? And those questions don't have easy answers.
And sometimes the answer is simply learning a language takes time.
Yes. But emotionally, that answer feels unsatisfying because you've already given time, years of time. So you start expecting results, big, clear results.
And when those results don't come in the way you imagined, disappointment grows.
Exactly. And that's the point where many learners stop enjoying English completely.
They still study, but without joy, without curiosity, just out of pressure.
And pressure is a terrible teacher.
It really is. Pressure makes you tense. It makes you afraid of mistakes. And language needs freedom. You can't speak freely when you're scared. That's such an important sentence. You can't speak freely when you're scared. Yeah. And that's where the real struggle begins. Not at the start of learning English, but here, in the middle, when you know enough to feel the weight of it. And this is exactly the point we need to talk about more. Yes. Because if learners understand that this stage is normal, maybe they'll be kinder to themselves. And maybe they'll stop thinking something is wrong with them. Exactly.
I want to stay on something you said earlier because I think it's the heart of the problem. You said English starts to feel like a way to judge yourself. And honestly, that hit me hard because I felt that too, even if I didn't always know how to explain it. When you learn English for a long time, it slowly mixes with your identity. It's not just something you do anymore, it becomes something you are, or at least something you feel you should be good at. And once it reaches that level, every mistake feels personal. It's no longer, oh, I said the wrong word. It becomes, why can't I express myself properly? And that question is much heavier.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's why English hurts more than other skills. If I'm bad at some random software or tool, I can say, okay, I just haven't practiced enough. But with English, it feels different. Language is how we show our personality, our humor, our intelligence. When that doesn't come out clearly, it feels like you are unclear. Sometimes I feel like a simpler version of myself in English, less funny, less sharp, less confident, and I hate that feeling.
That's such an honest thing to say, because people rarely talk about that part. They talk about grammar rules, vocabulary size, pronunciation, but they don't talk about how learning a new language can make you feel smaller than you really are. You know what's painful? When you know you have a good idea, but you don't have the words to express it properly. So you either say it in a simple way, or you don't say it at all.
Yes, and after some time, you start choosing silence more often. Not because you don't care, but because explaining yourself feels tiring. Sometimes I think, if I speak, I'll need to explain more. I'll need to correct myself. I'll need to repeat. And suddenly, staying quiet feels easier.
But that silence comes with a cost.
It really does. Because when you stay quiet again and again, people start seeing you as quiet. Not thoughtful, just quiet. And then you start seeing yourself that way too. That's the scary part. Your behavior slowly changes how you see yourself.
Yeah. And that's when confidence really starts to drop. Not just confidence in English, but confidence in conversations, in groups, in social situations.
Exactly. There have been times when I avoided situations just because I knew English would be involved. Not because I can't understand, but because I didn't want to feel that pressure again. And when you start avoiding things, learning stops being active. It becomes passive.
That's such a key point. Avoidance feels like rest, but it actually slows growth even more.
Yes. And then you feel guilty because you know you're avoiding practice, and that guilt adds another layer of pressure. So now English is not just difficult, it's stressful.
And stress kills curiosity.
Exactly. I remember when I used to enjoy watching English videos just for fun. I didn't care if I missed some words. I just enjoyed the content. Now sometimes I can't enjoy it anymore. My brain turns everything into a lesson. Did I understand that? Should I write that word down? It stops being fun.
That sounds like burnout.
Yeah, I think it is. Language burnout. You're still learning, but without energy, without excitement. You keep going because you feel you have to, not because you want to.
And burnout is tricky because from the outside it looks like laziness, but it's not.
Exactly. It's mental exhaustion. You're tired of trying, tired of correcting, tired of feeling not good enough. And when people say just practice more, it feels like they don't understand the real problem.
Yeah. Because the problem is not lack of effort. It's too much effort for too long.
Yes. And what makes it worse is that English has no clear finish line. You never feel done. There's always more to learn, more accents, more expressions, so you never get that feeling of completion.
That's such an important observation. Many skills have an endpoint, but language doesn't. And for some people, that's exciting. For others, it's exhausting.
For me, it's exhausting. Sometimes I wish someone could just tell me, okay, this is enough, you're good now. But no one can say that, and I can't say it to myself either. And that's where self-kindness is missing. Yes, I'm very patient with other learners. When I hear someone struggling, I think, it's okay, they're learning. But when it's me, I don't allow that same patience.
That's such a common pattern. We give others understanding, but we demand perfection from ourselves.
Exactly. And I think that's the deepest struggle with learning English. Not vocabulary, not grammar. It's accepting that progress is messy, slow, and sometimes invisible.
And accepting that you are still yourself, even when your English is not perfect.
Yes, that's something I'm still learning.
I think after talking about all of this, there's one thing that feels very clear to me. The problem was never that English is hard. The problem is the relationship we build with it over time. When you start learning English, it's light. You explore, you try, you laugh at mistakes. But somewhere along the way, English becomes serious. It becomes tied to success, intelligence, future, career. And once that happens, every mistake feels heavier than it should. I don't think the solution is study more or push harder. I think the real change starts when you stop treating English like a test and start treating it like a tool again, a tool you use, not something that measures your value.
Yeah. Listening to you say that, I realize how much pressure I've put on myself without noticing. I turned English into a standard I had to reach, instead of something that grows with me. And maybe that's why it became so exhausting, because I was always chasing an idea of good enough that never arrived. I think what I need, and what many learners need, is permission. Permission to speak badly, permission to pause, permission to not sound smart all the time.
Exactly. Because fluency doesn't come from avoiding mistakes. It comes from surviving them, from speaking even when it feels uncomfortable, from realizing that most people are not judging you as much as you think they are. And even if someone does judge you, that doesn't erase your progress. It doesn't cancel your effort.
That's true. I also think we need to stop waiting for confidence before speaking. Confidence doesn't come first. Action does. Most confident speakers I know didn't wait until they felt ready. They spoke while feeling unsure. They learned to live with that feeling.
Yeah, confidence is usually the result, not the starting point.
And another thing I've realized is that English doesn't need to sound perfect to be real. When I think about my favorite conversations, they're not perfect. They're messy, emotional, sometimes grammatically wrong, but honest. That's the kind of English I want. Not perfect English, real English.
That's such an important shift. Real English over perfect English. Because real English lets you connect, and connection is the whole point of language.
Exactly. And maybe if learners hear more conversations like this, they'll realize they're not alone, that the frustration, the silence, the burnout, all of that is part of the journey, not a sign of failure.
Yeah. If you're listening to this and you're somewhere in that middle stage, not a beginner, not fluent, just know that this stage is real and it's common. You're not slow, you're not broken. You're just learning something that takes time. And it's okay if your English grows slowly. Slow growth is still growth. Exactly. And before we end, I want to say this. English Unlocked is not about unlocking perfect English. It's about unlocking confidence, honesty, and comfort with the language you already have. Yeah, and if this conversation felt familiar to you, if you saw yourself in any part of it, you're definitely not alone. We genuinely like to hear your thoughts, not because you have to comment, but because conversations continue when people share their experiences. So if you want, you can tell us in the comments, what part of learning English has been the hardest for you? We read them. And sometimes just reading someone else's story helps more than any lesson. All right, that's it for today. Thanks for listening. This was English Unlocked.